thank you all for coming out today for the this wonderful artist reception. So nice to see a lot of familiar faces, but it's also nice to see some new faces. So thank you all for coming. I know there's a lot going on today in the city of Fort Dodge, and you know, being that it's a holiday today, you know, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's a wonderful holiday. So we've got an amazing artist here from Minneapolis, Minnesota, RJ Kern, and his fantastic exhibit of photographs that I think a lot of people in this area can really connect with and resonate with. I know, at least from my family, I have several kids in the 4-H program, and so there's a lot of great connections that within my family they can make with this exhibit. So I think it's really fantastic. And you know, and the plan too, being part of, you know, Webster County and the greater you know, north central Iowa area, I think it, you know, at least for me, it's really important to find exhibits that I can bring in that connects with the groups that, you know, that are surrounding us. So, you know, trying to connect art and agriculture and those aspects is really, really great. And I think this exhibit is a wonderful testament to both forms. And so, just a couple things. Remember to follow us on Facebook. If you're not a friend already, please become one of. We do push a lot of the events that are happening through Facebook. We do have a website, so you can check out the website as well. If you're not a member, think about becoming a member. We have forms and things that you can take a look at, and you know, when you're a member, we send out publications to you, we send out postcards to you about all the upcoming exhibits, and then also the receptions that we're having as well. And then a couple things to add to your calendar is that, you know, in June 8th, we have the Blaine Art Festival, which will be held on the grounds here of the museum. And we have, we'll have some wonderful artists selling their works. We'll have some performers performing. We have a lot of great kid activities, and it's all free. You don't have to pay a dime. Donations are, of course, welcomed, but it's something that we do for the community, and if you're around, please attend. I think it is a wonderful event and activity. Also, too, June 15th, we will have another artist reception for the exhibit that's upstairs. And if you haven't seen that one yet, please check that one out. It's really kind of an amazing ceramic exhibit, and it's got a way different feel than this space, you know. And it's one of the remarkable things that I'll have to say is that for me as the curator, you know, how the exhibits change so much by what's on the walls and what's on the floor, and how you light it in different ways. And so, and the last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to RJ here, is that we do record the artist receptions, and so we do have a YouTube channel. So if you like what you hear and want to revisit it, it'll be posted on our YouTube channel probably by the end of next week. It takes me a little bit to upload, edit, you know, and do all the in-betweens there. So, but all of our artist talks since COVID are basically on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and check out any of the ones that we've done in the past by other artists. And there are a series of other videos that we produced during COVID when we were kind of shut down, but we were still putting out programming. So with that, let's give a warm welcome to RJ. And I'll
Thank you so much, Eric, for the warm introduction. Hey everyone! Oh, hi! It's great to be here. May the 4th be with you. On May 4th. So I've got a presentation to show. First off, I always like to get to know my audience a little better. So raise your hand if you ever showed at 4-H. Okay, I would say about 25% of the room. Right. Raise your hand if you currently have an animal at home. All right, about half of the room. Awesome. Raise your hand if you like photography. That's like 95%. Oh my gosh, this is great. I found my people. I love it. Well, my name is RJ Kern. I drove down this morning from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Excited to be here. And I've got a little presentation here. I'm going to, hopefully everything works. presentation. Want to give a big old special thanks out to the Blended Art Museum for having me here today. I'm lucky to work with two wonderful galleries, the Veronique Wayans Gallery in Minneapolis and Olson Larson Galleries in West Des Moines, Iowa. Elise Vernon's right here from the gallery. She surprised me, so that was a really cool thing. I've been fortunate to work with National Geographic Magazine, as well as two publishers, Kehrer Verlag in Germany and MW Editions in Brooklyn. And this project that you see here was funded by the Minnesota State Arts Board. So I want to give a big thanks to them for their support. One of my favorite people is Temple Grandin. I don't know if anyone knows Temple Grandin. She's a professor of animal science at Colorado State University, and she has high-functioning autism. And she essentially revolutionized the cattle industry through her squeeze machine, giving a hug. And so that's kind of what today is about, is we are building a hug. And I love this quote. She says, "I am using my mind to solve problems and inventing things." So I just think as we look around at the people, the community that are here today, I think this is wonderful, right? We can help each other. In my artist talks, if you have a question, please raise your hand. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Only a stupid answer, so the pressure becomes on me, right? So please ask away. It's a kid-friendly audience. Kids, I got some fun things and videos too to share with you, so bear with me. All right, so off we go. So our little roadmap here for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes tops, because I want to make sure we have time for questions, as well as a little show and tell, which was my favorite part when I was your age, the show and tell. I'm going to give you my photo background, talk about some of my inspirations in the art world, talk about the Unchosen Ones exhibition, which we have here, and then give you a little introduction to brand new projects that I'm working on. So, photo background. In 2012, I created this portrait of Quigley in Ireland. I was there to photograph a wedding. And weddings has a lot of stress that goes with it, and it was such a nice treat to go out in the pasture with my studio lighting equipment and create this portrait of this sheep in this landscape. Right? This sheep doesn't care about what they look like, unlike a bride on her wedding day. Right? They're very self-conscious, right? And as a portrait photographer, this was a nice little respite for me. Also, the game of golf. You look at this, it looks like a golf course. No, it was basically groomed by sheep and goats. And goats were actually a part of how the original sand traps were formed in Scotland and stuff like that. So this is one of the first photographs that I've created for a fine art project. And I will return to this at a later little surprise at the end to share with you. So remember this image quickly. This photograph is created in Norway. It's Olaf, named after my son. Also, if you're a Frozen fan, the world's most friendly snowman, right? Family name. But in this project, the sheep and the goats, I'm retracing some of my family history, my heritage in Norway, Iceland, Ireland, and Germany, and looking at very common, ordinary animals. And according to National Geographic, sheep and goats are among the oldest domesticated creatures, right? Humans have had relationships with goats and sheep just as long as with dogs. And we've used them for fiber, for meat, for milk, for cheese. Who's seen a baby goat? For humor, right? Yeah, highly entertaining, right? And so I was interested in how they have shaped us and how we have shaped them in return, both through animal contests and animal husbandry. We go to county fairs. It's kind of like a breeding show, right? It's a beauty contest meets a bodybuilding contest, with somewhat subjective but also objective criteria, right? And so we're basically impacting the evolution of these animals by what traits are deemed ideal by the judge, right? It's kind of not that much different to fashion in the 1980s with the big puffy sleeves, right? And the women's dresses, like that was popular then. Today, maybe not so much, right? So trends come and go. Similarly, with goats, a lot of the front three quarters, the judges wanted to see the front limbs more muscular than the rear quarters. So, question?
Well, there's a wire that's over the
Oh, thank you. How's that?
Sorry,
Is that better?
Those things,
I appreciate that.
distracting from the picture, sorry.
I'm heavily inspired by painters in terms of composition and light. And so if we look at the previous photograph here, we've got this leading line going to the goat's eyes. We have a strong foreground, middle ground, background. You have warm and cool push-pull colors. Your eye goes to the warm first, then the cooler colors. We see this in one of my favorite painters, Thomas Sidney Cooper. Similar with leading lines towards subjects. We have shadow detail, right? Information legible in the shadows, which makes this painterly resemblance. So one of my favorites, Mr. Hofsas in Iceland. It's very strong, regal. Almost looks like a royal portrait of this very ordinary animal. Since it's Star Wars Day, I thought it would be appropriate to bring out Attack of the Clones. You know, mammals have been cloned before, and Dolly the sheep was the first. So in a lot of my work, yes, I can poke through aesthetics. I can then kind of dive into a deeper meaning, and then generally there's going to be an even deeper meaning in that. It was a photograph I created in Germany. My strobes did not function. They didn't flash, so as I was creating the portraits, I had to use a slower exposure on my camera, and that's what created this kind of motion blur, which adds a sense of movement, right? And I say Attack of the Clones because in the Star Wars movie, the bad guys, the little robots, they kind of look like the sheep, right? Here's a similar tonality in terms of this greens in the shadow. This is the shepherdess watering the sheep in 1881. And so you can see this kind of underexposed skyline, these strong foreground, middle ground, background, a moment, right? Those are things that I'm thinking about when I'm creating a photograph. I'm sure many of us have heard of this magazine before. This is this photograph. It's not a painting, not Dutch Flemish painting. There's no Photoshop in this photograph. This is a 3-light setup. So I bring studio lighting into the field to create my portraits of animals and people. This is Dumb and Dumber. I did not name it. Lewis did, and Lewis's portrait we'll see coming up here. But this was an important part of the Unchosen Ones series because originally I went to the county fairs to create connections with the community, which would then lead me to be able to create kind of the pastoral images that I was really eager to create. But I didn't realize the stepping stone was these portraits. This became the critically acclaimed project that people really found endearing. So I published my first book, and I have copies available for sale here of The Sheep and the Goats. It was my first published book featuring all these animals in the landscape. And how I managed to create the work in Europe was important because then we see it in Minnesota. So half the work in this book is in the Midwest, and half is in Europe. And it's a contrast in similarities between landscape and the type of sheep. So in 2016, my buddy and I were talking about one of my favorite movies, Talladega Nights. Who's seen it before? Will Ferrell. And in his movie, his dad's like, son, if you ain't first, you're last. Right? And he put all this pressure on his life to be the best. And think about that in society. Like if you play soccer or sports, everyone wants their competitor trophy, but not everyone can be a winner, right? And so, also one of my other favorite movies, Cars. Who likes Cars? Like the movie Cars? Did you know the first thing Lightning McQueen says in the first Disney movie Cars was this, quote, "One winner, 42 losers. I eat losers for breakfast." True fact, this emphasis on being the best and being a winner hits hard early on. I'm like, my goodness. So, these little ideas were running through my head as I was beginning the Unchosen Ones project. Now I have about a 5 to 6 minute video that gives you a full overview with behind the scenes as I'm photographing the youth, and I'd like to go ahead and show you that.
That will be first, and this will be second.
think like a painter, both in terms of the light I use, its interplay with shadow, and I think the most important thing is I'm looking for this humanity in the moment. The Unchosen Ones project took over 6 years to create. I drove 10,000 miles and photographed 65 youth. In 2016, I traveled to as many county fairs as I could that summer. I made it to 10. Then in 2020, I traveled to them and met them on their home pasture. Or what do you love best about Pootie?
I love that she has her own personality. She is her own little goat. She will do what she wants, when she wants, how she wants.
Is that kind of like you?
More or less.
How do I choose my subject and location? I feel like sometimes like these kids chose me.
I've been in 4-H since I was 4 or 5.
My favorite things, showing, definitely at the state fair. I put in so much work year-round for one day of showing.
All your hard work comes back, it feels amazing. It feels like you won the lottery.
I use a medium format camera and studio lighting in the field, which is a very slow way of working. I like the mindfulness that comes with moving slow. People say never work with animals or kids. Yeah, I did both. How did I put them at ease and make it happen? Patience and a sense of humor goes a really long way. If you had to choose to spend more time with family or more time with your animals, which would you choose?
Animals.
Okay. If you had a choice to spend more time with your friends versus your animals, which would you choose?
Definitely my animals.
Definitely your animals. Here's Annabelle, and I'll ask Annabelle a few questions. So Annabelle, what's your favorite food?
Probably grain.
Grain. All right. Does she have a favorite sound? What would that sound like?
Probably the sound of grain.
Okay. Now you might ask yourself, why the great backdrop? Well, for one, place matters. This series did not take place in a studio, but rather the raw setting of a county fair environment or a home pasture. I feel like the studio backdrop serves as a compositional device to almost elevate the subject beyond the ordinary. I'm interested in this messiness of real life. There, so a little wider angle. Not a hyper curation of the ideal. When I met them, I promised to put them in the best light possible. Yet before I clicked that shutter for the first set of portraits, I asked all the kids one thing. I said, show me what next year's grand champion could look like. And almost instantaneously, I saw the kids' demeanor and their body language change. And those little moments are when I create a photograph. Living on a farm is a full-time commitment. It's not a benefit. It takes a lot of hard work. I just hope that county fairs will still be around in 100 years, and kids will still be learning valuable life lessons from raising and showing animals. What's the favorite thing that you love about working with your animals?
That they're honestly my life.
So, wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about some inspirations here. So the work itself does draw on the photographic portrait tradition. And photography, I feel like at this point, is well entrenched in the art world. But it wasn't always the case. As we kind of find our way in life, I feel like we all know what it's like not to be chosen for something. Whether it be for love, a job, sports. But yet it's that resilience that I feel like ultimately defines us. That determines that character. And that's the life skills that come from showing animals at these 4-H shows, right? It's the hard work, it's the attitude, it's hot, it's smelly, it's stinky. You can't control your animals, right? And there's a lot of parallels, I feel like, being an artist, being a parent, that I take from looking at these kids. So, wanted to share a few of these images. This is Gus and Doolittle. And the image over here on the wall is created in 2016 at the Monoman County Fair, which is where my mother-in-law grew up in northern Minnesota. And he has a reserve champion ribbon. And everyone's like, well, RJ, he's not the Unchosen Ones, he got a ribbon. Second place, right? It's like, well, he was second out of 2. And as I wrote in National Geographic, I said, I just hope the county fairs will be around in 100 years, and that kids will be learning the life lessons that come from raising and showing animals. This was Kenzie and Hootie, and when I created the first photographs, I was like, are you a model? She's like, no, but I practice in front of the mirror. But there was something in that image that I was like, I think I've seen this type of contrapposto before. And so I look back to the paintings like St. Sebastian and Sodoma, where we have this crossed, articulating leading lines from limbs. We've got warmth, we've got kind of compressed highlights here in shadows. And there's a similarity in that kind of direct stance. So when you study, I say, especially, who likes to study art? Any good thing? I think that's a really important thing. You go to museums, and I realize I'm speaking to the choir here, right? You put good things in your head, good things come out, right? Going to good museums, seeing good films, cinema, books, magazines, right? Like, exposing yourself to those visuals can help you, right? I also am excited at the birth of animal contests, aka the fairs, like the New York State Fair, was born about the same time as the birth of photography. And so that's why some of the first photographs we see are of prize-winning animals, horses and cattle. Here's Adrian Tourneschan, mid-19th century Paris, right? It was 1850. We're looking at these pristine salt prints. And these photographs served as documents for the genetics of the animal for breeding standards, right? It's one thing if you're painting a cattle, maybe you're going to overly embellish certain features, right? It's like if I'm doing a photo of my mom, she's like, can you just get rid of the, right? But no, these are documents, right? I've been influenced by August Sander. He's a portrait photographer between the wars who's interested in ordinary, everyday people. This is a bricklayer. Typology is a word that you might hear in the art world, and it essentially allows the viewer to differentiate one thing from another. So if we have different animals, different kids, it allows us to see changes that might occur or differences. Berndt and Helen Becher brought this typology of grain silos, grain cylinders in the Midwest, right, where they went around and created these photographs. This was an exhibition curated by Peter Galassi for the Museum of Modern Art. So it firmly planted photography and the typology into the art world. Been influenced by Deanna Arbus, again, a portrait photographer, interested in the ordinary, or in this case, the slightly not so ordinary, whether it be photographing twins or circus oddities, right? We'll see some similarities. This is arguably one of the most famous photographs of Demi Moore, very pregnant Demi Moore, photographed by probably one of the most famous living photographers, Annie Leibovitz. Who's heard of Annie Leibovitz before? Yeah, I'm definitely a no one compared to Annie Leibovitz, right? What I found interesting about this photograph is she's used the photographic background as kind of a compositional device, but then she left in the artifice of the studio, the C-stands, the fan, the coffee cup on the stool, right? She isn't interested in perfection. She wants the messiness of life, which is real, which is raw, which is exactly what I'm doing. Going to county fairs. Now, being an artist, it's a little, I didn't grow up on a farm. I drive a minivan. But I love this Ted Lasso quote. If I didn't have any confidence, I never would have worn pajamas to my prom and ended up in jail the rest of that night. So when I teach workshops on business practices to other artists, it's like having a grant helps you to give you that confidence. Like, yes, I'm working on a project, right, that has intent. And chances are you've had to write about what you want to do, so it helps to guide you. And so that's what I did when I created the Unchosen Ones project. I think photographers are lucky. We have these things called portfolio reviews. Think of it like 20-minute speed dating, where you sit across the table from someone who can do something for your career. This was at Photo Lucida Portfolio Reviews in Portland. And this is the boss, the director of photography at National Geographic, and she fell in love with this project. And she's like, has this been published before? I said, no. And this is the actual portfolio that I brought to show her. Fast forward, this is Washington, D.C., National Geographic headquarters. Here is Dumb and Dumber, the two goats, right? On the wall next to the likes of Sylvia Earle and dinosaurs, right? And then the magazine came out, and you can see several of these portraits on the wall here. And then this is the same animal out to pasture. So this is Annabelle at home, and this is Cole and Annabelle. And we heard from Cole and Annabelle in the grain bucket, right? That same photograph. I have a collector's edition that I actually brought with me. This is my second to last one, where we actually shorn the animals just before they got sick. And they passed away already. And we have little fiber samples. So this is the Angora goat, the fiber from that animal. And then this is the first animal I photographed, a Scoppy, which is that animal right there for the project. And so we actually wove together the fiber from both the Angora goat and the sheep into the fiber into this little project. So if you're interested in seeing this, I'll leave this up here. There's some of those little details. I love collaborating with other artists on my projects. I worked with a skin fill artist named Karen. And skin fill is the earliest form of Norwegian art. Think of it cartoons. When they would have sheep pellets to keep warm, they would do wood block printing on the inside of the sheep pellets, right? It's cartoons for kids. And so we did a sheep on the right and the goats on the left inside the collector's edition. Going to portfolio reviews gives an opportunity to engage with audiences, as well as sharing your work on a wider platform. I think photographers are lucky. We have things like the bridge, or the fence. And this is kind of in a construction area underneath the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. I think it's important bringing art to the people. And so this is the Monoman County Fair. This is where that portrait was taken. And so when I went back out to the fairs, I thought it was important to interview the individuals. I asked them questions. What life skills have you learned from raising and showing your animals, and so on. It was great to reconnect with the kids too. This is Bryce and Nathan, and I'd ask them, oh, how are Freaky Freddy and Skittles, the name of their sheep? And they kind of looked at each other and laughed, and they're like, you're in our freezer. You know, these kids use these animals, right? So then I published the book, which the project first had 65 portraits at 10 county fairs. 4 years later, I was able to rephotograph 50 of the kids. But this time, instead of asking them the question, show me next year's grand champion, the second time I photographed them, I asked them, show me your best self, right? Kind of giving them this sense of like, I am important. self-awareness, self-esteem, positivity. Especially as you go through adolescence, there's a lot of those awkward years. And the fact that like they can see their likeness and their image and like, wow, that is me, can be really impactful. I've got several youth. This gentleman here, Gus, he was homeless for 3 months, right? To try to track him down. He was living under a railroad bridge, a train bridge. And he fished every day for his food, and he had a liter of Mountain Dew. That was his diet, right? Yeah. So there's quite a bit of social and economic disparity we see in rural America, and I think it's important to talk about that. But the fact that I was still able to find, say what you do matters, even though your last year showing at 4-H show, you came in last, right, second place, you still matter as a human being, right? And that someone can take that time to, I think it's very impactful. Like, you don't understand how that can shape someone's life in a positive way. So the book, which I have several copies up here, is kind of arranged in what's called a diptych. So a side-by-side pairing, much like what we see in the installation views here at the Blended Art Museum. I also created the collector's edition, which is a denim cloth bound. I hand make the folios that go with it, and it gives collectors an opportunity to select 2 different prints from the project, any 2 prints, and they're additioned of 10. So these prove to be really popular with a lot of the youth because for under $500, they can have 2 signed photographs that they don't have to frame, which is really expensive, right? They can keep it on a shelf. They don't have to screw things into the wall, which, a lot of people have limited wall space. And this really helped to kind of keep the project alive. I have one of these here today as well, if you'd like to look at that. Now, one of my favorite things, I have 3-minute long little videos that I think everyone's going to really enjoy. I asked all 50 kids the same set of questions. And what advice would you give your competitors? And I'd like to share this with you. What advice would you give other competitors who maybe are showing up for the first time?
Give it your all, and even if it doesn't end up the way that you want, it will be okay.
Stick with it and keep working very hard.
Work as hard as you can.
That's a hard one.
Work hard with your animal and love on them. It's gonna be hard. They're not gonna want to do it. You're not gonna want to do it. But the more you put in, the more you're gonna get out.
Definitely practice, and if you don't put in the practice, fake it until you make it.
Just keep working at it. Keep doing your hardest.
Stay calm, keep a level head, and just be a good boy.
Be very patient with your animal.
You have to have patience in order to show and take care of your animal and all that.
Work with your animals every day and get them ready for the fair and do the best you can.
It is another living being. It will have a mind of its own. It's not just going to do what you want.
Love your animals, really. Be kind to them, they'll be kind to you.
Spend the time to make the relationships with your animals.
Feed them, know what you're feeding, know what you're giving them, know what you're making. Just know basically about what makes them unique, like characteristics, all that stuff too. You can spend more time with them and then it can be more tame for you maybe, but just spend time with them.
You just gotta work with your animals a lot.
Don't get all worked up if your animals are cooperating with you.
Just try your best. You can only do what you can do.
Never give up and always look at the judge.
Never to be mad on what place you get, but just to be happy that you did good.
Don't think of showing as for advice is that, don't get angry, don't get sad for winning or losing. Well, if you win, feel happy, but don't get mad or sad.
Be happy with what you've done. Be proud of what you raised.
Don't worry about who else is in the ring. Just focus on you and your animal. Feel assurance that you know you could have done better, and you will do better one year, and you can face that challenge to get better and better and better.
Just relax and have fun. Definitely just relax.
Just try to do your best, and if you mess up, try to correct yourself.
Even if you get last place, you still gain a very good experience.
In reality, you never know what's actually going to happen, so you just need to take things slow and
don't get mad at yourself or your animal because that will never help you out.
Just have fun, and it's okay if you don't win, and it's okay if you do bad. You're not gonna die.
Take advice, take hints, be open to criticism, and you'll get better.
Go out there and have fun.
Keep your chin up, work as hard as you can, learn from your mistakes.
Don't fret too much about where you get. Just make sure that you don't hate on people and hate the activity while you're doing it.
I just have fun. If you work hard, you'll hopefully eventually win.
Try your hardest, and if you don't get first, it's not that big of a deal. Just make sure you come back the next year and do better.
I'm probably about the same as what she said.
You can tell the kids that had like practice with public speaking, like in the judges. Well, good. Well, I want to give plenty of time for questions as well as to debut some new work. There is another video series on my website. You can watch it for free on life skills, but just for the sake of time, I want to make sure that that's an option. You can do this. I do want to share one funny story. So as I'm re-photographing these youth, I really tried to work hard to ask them, how do they want to be portrayed? What's your thing now? What's your interest? And Caleb here, he was really into restoring old tractors. And so he tried to pull the tractor out for the photograph, and the front tire blew. It sounded like a shotgun, right? And he was so bummed. And I'm like, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to bring the portraits of you to you. All right? And so we got barn kitties and chickens and all over the place. And hey, guys, I was like, Caleb, of all the things in life that we have control over, there's one thing that we truly have control over, and that's our attitude, right? We can choose a good attitude or we can choose a bad attitude. It's really up to us. And he kind of looked at me, and of course his parents were like, I've been telling him this for all these years. When you have some outsider come in and say this, you're like, come on, right? I also wanted to show some current work. So I began this series called The Last Fair in 2022. A lot of the principal research began in 2021 when the Ramsey County Fair was canceled. In 2020, all the fairs were canceled due to COVID. But then the Ramsey County Fair, which is in St. Paul, Minnesota, right, our capital, never came back. I was really surprised to this day. And who would have thunk in 2019 that would have been the last year for the county fair? Something I think a lot of us just take for granted, right? And it made me think about this notion of joy isn't often fully appreciated until it's gone. And so, inspired by painters like Grandma Moses, who knows Grandma Moses' work? She started to paint when she was 75. 75, self-taught, right? High horizon line, ordinary people. These photographs take 6 months of planning for a 15-minute photo. Now, if you like photography, if you know Gregory Crutzen and Jeff Wall, they're way over here on this end of the continuum. I'm way over, RJ's way over here. I enjoy this series a lot. I've got 8 county fairs I'm going to this summer, so I'm excited to be creating new work. Some of that work might be shown in Des Moines, coming up here at the end of August. And it's this kind of large-scale tableau. And I'm slowly finding the world's best tripod is a bucket truck. Because I get permission from the county fair board, and man, the view just gets bigger and better with the higher you go. It's really cool, really cool. But everyone's like, "Oh, RJ, are you posing people?" And I was like, "Have you ever tried to pose a kid with an animal?" So everyone is aware, right? But there's no Photoshop. That's part of the challenge, is creating the photographs with intent and being very mindful myself. The other thing is there's like a major motion picture set behind me with lighting equipment, and so I've got a lot of the family that are there helping me as I'm creating these photographs. Here's one. This is the tricycle that was in the movie Big Bird, the Big Bird movie. And imagine being a 4-year-old kid at the county fair, and you're like, there's Big Bird! That's a pretty special, impactful experience, right? So in each one of these photographs, I'm interviewing people and asking them, if this was the last year for your fair, what would you miss most? This is the largest llama exhibition in the state, so lots of llama mamas. The title of this photograph, which I did bring one available here, is called Santa on Vacation. And so I interviewed this gentleman here and asked him that same question. He's like, what's your favorite thing at the fair? He's like, I love the animal shows. And I was like, okay. So then I build the story around him. And so he's just sitting there with his bare feet. He volunteers at battered women's shelters and nursing homes as Santa Claus, right, during the holidays. But we have the world's largest bunny, or second world's largest bunny. I thought you would like that. We have an albino python in here, right? So I try to interact with a lot of the other vendors at the county fair. This is the Houston County Fair. This is one of my most recent photographs. And so many of these little nuanced stories can be seen as we unpack these. Enough about me. Time for your questions. What you got for me? And there's no such thing as a stupid question, okay? First one, yes?
How did you get started in all of this?
I had a great experience in high school. In a high school darkroom photography class, and that was in 1994, and it just kept on. But it took me 12 years to find my shtick, as we say it. Like, what are you going to be known for? Up to that point, there hadn't been a lot of people that had photographed sheep and goats this way, right? So I kind of became the sheep and goat guy, right? And I had a trusted curator asked me, she's like, RJ, I just want to see one of your projects without a goat in it. So I did just release a project with that. It was a 13-year photo project of these little Norwegian dolls that I chronicle my family's adventure at Christmas time. So, yes. Question?
When you started before you take pictures? When you started before you started doing pictures? Like, pictures on the walls? But when you started doing those, the pictures, when was the first time you did that?
When was the first time? Help me, a parent, help me paraphrase what
I think he wants to know when you started doing studio workout.
Ah, perfect. Great question. 2016-15 timeframe. And I took a workshop with Annie Leibovitz lighting instructor, Felix Kuntz, to kind of learn how Annie Leibovitz lights. And so it's like chefs sharing their approaches and recipes and stuff like that. Good question. Yes?
What cameras did you use? Did you use a large format camera?
I use a Phase 1, which is a medium format digital camera. So it's 60 megapixel at the time, and since I've upgraded, so it's a full-on 151 megapixel camera, which is, if you were to take an 8x10 color slide or cheap film and scan that in on a drum scan, you'll find that they're almost comparable. I joke, it's kind of like taking a Formula One race car to the grocery store. You can do it, it's just those speed bumps, like, make it cumbersome. It's really good at doing one thing, and generally I have to shoot it on a tripod, I need lots of lighting, but it's a fashion photographer camera, really, yeah. And actually, I have it with me, so if you want to come see it and hold it, I'm happy to. I also have in my car, I have two 120-year-old cameras. One I just bought used on eBay for $200. It's all wood, it's a Kodak number 2 8x10 view camera. And I use that one just as well as my digital. I love both. And for those photo people in the room, you know what the best camera is?
Yeah.
It's the one that's with you, right? So all those fancy cameras in my car, I didn't use them taking my little photos in this room. So, good question. More questions? Yes?
Did you have a farm background of any type, or were you ever in for it?
No. Yeah, no, my mother-in-law grew up on the farm, and she would tell stories about the county fair as like the highlight of her summer. And, you know, I was a military brat growing up. We moved around a lot, and especially as a parent now with two second and third grader, like just growing roots in a community and knowing where your food comes from is really important. I think a lot of kids don't know where cotton comes from. They think it grows on a tree. And they don't realize, no, you need sheep for wool, right? Or not cotton. They don't know where wool comes from. They think it grows on the same tree that the cotton comes from. It's hard being up here. Or that food is grown and it's hard to be a farmer, right? And not everything is packaged out of nature, right? Yeah. You know, I deep concern is where are we going to get our food from in 20 years? That's a real problem that we need to think about. who's the next generation of farmers? Where are they going to come from? Hopefully 4-H, FFA skills will help. Question?
So as you are meticulously setting up your studio in the field, I just got your very first photo of what was the name of the sheep in Ireland?
Quigley.
Quigley.
Yes.
I just imagine you setting everything up and then Quigley walks out of the frame.
Oh my God, yes.
What are the, do you allow yourself as you're kind of setting up these tableaus to look and say, ooh, that would be a great shot, that lighting is perfect, by the time you're done, you say, it's gone?
It's patience and a sense of humor. it's not that much different than like being a parent or raising a puppy, right? Like you think you have it all set, and then I turn around and pick up my camera and they all left. You know, unless I have a grain bucket, they don't know me, they don't care. So it's like trying not to, and there's a pecking order in skittishness too. Sheep are pretty bad, right? Goats will come up and nibble your belt buckle, right? They're very curious in general. Horses can be skittish, right? Cattle, they often don't care, right? So I often get the question too, why goats and sheep? And there's a very practical thing, is because they fit within a 6-foot backdrop that I can fit in my car. And there's nothing. Cattle are huge and pigs are hard to work with, right? For photos. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
How many of the 48 states have you photographed in?
For my fine art projects, not a lot. You know, it's a good question, because especially when you're affiliated with National Geographic, they often feel like, oh, you must travel, and you know, it's like, you know, I'm not interested in the exotic. I'm interested in finding beauty in the ordinary. I want to be home for my kids. Like, I want to be present. I don't want to be constantly traveling to create work. A lot of marriages suffer as a result. Kids growing up, parents aren't around. You know, when you run your own business, you choose the 12 hours of the day that you want to work.
I noticed a lot of Minnesota counties.
Yes, so that's because the grant I received was from the Minnesota State Arts Board, and they literally constrained because it's taxpayer dollars, they want you to stay. They don't want you to fly over to Iceland and go create work that Minnesota taxpayers are paying for. So that was one of it, right? The other thing is it was all within a day drive. So I didn't have to get on an airplane. I could bring a lot of equipment. Right? It was just, there's a practical sense to it, for sure. Plus, our county fairs are it's not like going in Texas, where it's just nasty, right? Now, it can be hot, right? But it's not like 110 often. It can be 95. Yeah. Good question. Other questions?
Do you
Yes?
do all set up yourself, or do you have an entourage that helps you with that?
I do it myself. I go to the gym so I can do my job. Yeah. No, it's a lot of heavy lifting, it's a lot of equipment. I'm exhausted at the end of each day because it's schlepping. I usually average about 20,000 steps every day I'm working, right? But I'm outside. I get to do this. I tell myself, I remind myself that, right? But I'm also pretty good at putting kids to work too. Like, hey, come on, help me out with this, help me out, right? Just being a delegator, I think that's a sign of a good leader. Right? I can't do it all myself. And they often want to help me, right? Especially no money exchanges hands between the youth that I'm photographing and me. And even this county fair project that I'm working on, they're not paying me to do it, right? There's no pressure. Because I feel like when the dollar changes hands, especially the commission process, adds a level of stress on top of it, right? And this is meant to be fun. This is my personal work. Good question. In the back?
How are their photographs transferred to these large cameras?
Good question. So the images are photographed digitally, and then I have a 44-inch large format printer that I print these at home. Now, a lot of people respond to the paper isn't perfect, it's not as, where's the glazing, the museum glass, and for one thing I say, you know, these kids were the last place kids at the county fair. You know, and empathy is a really important part of the project. Their emotions are fragile, right? Raw. And so I wanted the work to come across that way. Fragile, raw, not perfect, right? Then there's the pure practical constraint. My challenge is how to bring the art to the people. And this was meant to be a touring exhibition. And it's booked at 15 venues across the country, right? It's going from one, so there was a certain practical sense that this whole exhibition ships in like 3 golf club bags. So it keeps shipping costs down. And I think that's something like Eric appreciates when I wrote Eric. And you know, you don't have to do crated work by van line, $2,000 one-way shipping, which is common in our world, right? So I wanted to be accessible.
You said you photographed the last place quitters?
The Unchosen Ones.
So cool. That's very cool. That's going to be a little special then.
Yeah, and it's the kids that get 5th or 6th place that have to work harder the next year, right? That's what, that gets back to the life skills component, right? It was important too when I met them, they didn't know me. And so the fact that I was working on a grant project, I had to get parents' permission, I had to get model release signed, right? So there was a lot of that trust and rapport, had to, go, this like, you had to be a good person, help each other, yeah.
Well, what is your impression of this museum and how did you get here?
Sure.
What brought you here?
I got my car at about 10:30 this morning and drove here. I think this is so cool that this is the first art museum in the state, right? Yeah. That's really special because it's progressive, right? When this was built, art museums really weren't a thing, especially in the Midwest, right? So I understand the shoulders of the artists and the patrons that I stand on to be here today, so I'm extremely grateful. How did I get this exhibition booked here? There's an exhibition company called Exhibits USA that gets grant money, and they were going to tour this work for me for 5 years, and this was just before the pandemic, and they only could get 2 venues confirmed. And so that was enough, it was not enough venues to greenlight the exhibition, so they turned it back over to me. And I was bummed because A, I didn't get paid for all 18 months of waiting. B, I was like, how do I make lemonade out of lemons, right? So from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. every Tuesday for 3 months, I smiled and dialed. And I made a list, I did research, I contacted curators, I contacted museum directors. One thing about publishing books is this is the most expensive business card I'll ever have. And so there's something about a well-written cover letter, a monograph, leave behinds, professionalism. I think the National Geographic credential helped as well. People return, when I call, a lot of times I'll have a little fib. I'll say, yeah, it's RJ. Oh, who are you with? I'm a National Geographic published photographer. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm not lying, that's right. I'm not on assignment. So steady persistence, that's a big thing, right? I make a spreadsheet, I think I had 130 connected people, and out of that I got 10% actually things I went, which was phenomenal, right? So, good question. Yes?
Did you ever start out using film photography and then switch over to digital?
I did, yes.
Because in the film you will learn depth of field and that stop and shutter speeds and like that. And at what point did you decide to go digital?
When it got expensive. Film is expensive because you need a darkroom, you need their chemistry. A roll of 36 is pretty cheap, but then if you want to get it printed, that's expensive. Contact sheets, right? It was really starting my wedding photography business in 2006. I knew I needed duplicate backups of the negatives, right? If something were to happen to the negatives on a bride's wedding day, you can get sued. That's some real, especially in the commercial world, to have backed up, my data's in 2 different locations safely, so if a hard drive fails and it's backed up, that was just the right business thing to do, yeah. Photography now doesn't make a difference. I use a 120-year-old camera. I've got an image in this book that I created with this phone, right? And then I've got a really nice digital camera, right? To me, it's the photographer makes the photograph, not the camera. And I think one of Ansel Adams' arguably the most undervalued quotes he said, there's nothing worse than a sharp photo of a fuzzy idea. You can have a fuzzy photo of a sharp idea, and that's the real important thing. Other questions?
I'm fascinated by the frames.
Yeah.
So you just go roll in like a golf bag? Or
Yeah, so
something?
these are cherry wood frames that I made with magnets. They screw into the wall, and then the prints roll in tubes. Yep.
And there's no paper or anything, you just, the photograph's touching the photograph.
There's interleave pages, paper, butcher paper basically, but these are exhibition prints. These are not prints that are for sale. These are not signed prints, so that helps insurance prices down. However, if a collector or an institution acquires this work, that is treated differently. They are framed, they are mounted, they're signed, there's a certificate of authenticity. I actually have, this is a good example of some of the paperwork. So like these are all handmade folios. So I have, I think, 3 of these with me. I hand make the folios so that you don't have to frame it, but it's a signed open edition print that I did in November, and I kept 3. I was like, I'm gonna keep some, but then here's the paperwork that comes with it, right? That has the who, what, when, why, where, how of the photograph, so that these objects, they're gonna live longer than I will, right? And so I wanna know if the curator in 50 years is gonna know what kind of paper, when was it printed, when was the original date of the file, that sort of thing. Or if I'm working with a gallery, like I work with Olson Larson Gallery in West Des Moines, like they want to be transparent. They want to know all that information, that the artist is serious. Yeah. Good question. Any others? I'll be around, so go ahead.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in a giant castle. I have pictures at home of my great-grandfather in 1895.
Okay.
He was perched around horses, huge horses. And behind that horse standing, holding the tie, is his wife.
Okay.
Who bore him 13 children.
Wow.
And he's only got a picture of the horse.
Wow.
See the difference for thinking about that and seeing things.
Yeah. These kids will tell things to their animals that they won't tell their best friends. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That boy is kind of cute. Right? I tell my friend that, right? Or something like that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There are therapy animals for that sense. And there's a lot of pride, too. Much like building your house with your own 2 hands or creating a painting with your own 2 hands that comes with that craftsmanship, that artisanship. Thank you for sharing.
Is there one detail that you just would love to show us?
One detail?
You know what, this blows me away over here because it's right on the water.
It is.
You're right there, and the fishing rod, he could be catching a fish. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So he has a good sense of humor, because keep in mind, he was homeless, right?
Oh.
And so when we got together, it was, he was abused by his mom. And so he lived with his aunt and his grandma growing up. He just got out of jail for self-defense. He was in there for overnight. So there's some rich backstory. So, but we're like, dude, we gotta like laugh this off, right?
Yeah.
And so he put his hook on the fence. And I didn't tell him what to do. He's like, watch this! And then boom. Yeah, so you put someone in a place, or you know, and a lot of times I'm fidgeting around trying to pretend to fix something. I'm waiting for something to happen, right? And then click, right? Because there's some of these moments that you can't post. That it's just they're real, they're raw. Like here's Shania with Greg. This is her goat in 2016. Well, the family farm was sold. And I would say about a quarter of the youth that I photographed, the family farms are gone within 4 years, right? So she moved to St. Paul, Minnesota. Here's her boyfriend. He's holding, you can see just this little part of his head. He's helping to hold the backdrop from blowing. And she has her parrots named Pineapple. And my kids were napping in the van during this whole portrait session, and that was the best gift they could have given me, is this opportunity to create a little portrait. But just the way that this dress creates this, and that her lead matched her dress, like I don't think she planned any of that. And this kind of like slightly awkward, like pose, like I think we all know what it's like to have that. It's real, right? And that's what I was really interested in. I love, like on this one here, this photograph, Fair Fine Arts Exhibition, received an honorable mention. It was so fun to see the farm kids come up, and they knew what all of these implements were, right? And it's just fun to see all the messages, the rawness of. The camera pose. I hate being photographed. I'm working on the other side of the camera. So I asked you to do that. But I love this messiness, this rawness of the farm that isn't a place as you talked about. Right?
Least wild over.
Yeah, and that's the moments, right? That's what I got my composition, I got my lighting. Now it's where's the moments. Those are the three ingredients that I think make what an effective program is. Well, I'll be around until 5, answering lots of questions. Please bring your credit card over here. And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Now let's give RJ a round.
I almost forgot. Sorry, Eric. So, Eric has been very generous helping make this happen. And I gave him a little gift earlier today. I think it's probably in a safe spot. But I did come with something very special that this is Anna and Helen, which is a photograph that is not a part of this show. The curators have their choice of what work to hang. It kind of goes with the project of choosing, right? The title of the project. But this is Anna and Helen from Blue Earth County Fair. And I asked Eric earlier today, I said, what's the museum's acquisition process like? And would you ever consider a direct donation from an artist? And so I hope it is accepted, is acquired. But this is this photograph, and then if you remember the first photograph,
yes.
Let me pull it up here. So I wanted to see what this looked like in Minnesota, and that's why I created this photograph. So in the book, in the Sheep and the Goat book, they're paired side by side, so you can flip and see the difference in the landscape. And yeah. So this is the other photograph that it might be a part of the permanent collection soon. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. And just remember, like us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook, and grab something to eat before you go. So I got plenty out there still. And thank you all again for coming today. And hopefully we'll see you in June. So thank you. And then also buy some stuff from RJ.